A very good evening to everybody. Thanks for clicking on to this very special live stream this evening. The time is just gone 25 to 8 on this Sunday, the 24th of November. A very warm welcome to the audience this evening. It is the big one. It is the biggest night of the 2024 calendar for Marfogan Weather. It is the release of the winter forecast, and I know there is a lot of excitement out there with regards to what the verdict is. Obviously, the cold that we've seen in the last 5 to 7 days or so has now ended with quite an abrupt end, actually, with the storm Bert affecting. Let me just click off here just real quick. Sorry about this. So obviously it came to an abrupt end over the last 24 hours or so, with the mild conditions coming back in. We've seen temperatures as high as nearly 18.4, close to 19 Celsius this afternoon in East Anglia. And what a shock to the system that is. Now, what is interesting actually is the fact that we had a very mild spell prior to the Arctic air coming south. So we've seen these big swings over recent months between mild and cold. And is that a harbinger of things to come, or is it simply that we have now seen winter and things are going to abruptly change? That is going to be the big question. I'm going to have a quick chat. We're going to go through the live chat as well, give people a shout out, answer a couple of questions. I'm obviously not going to divulge too much with those questions because we're going to be looking at the finer details in a little while or so now. But we've got a big stream so far. There is 91 concurrent viewers at the moment here, so be sure to hit that like button, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel as well. Massive thank you to the moderators tuning in this evening. We've got Lisa, we've got Paul James. I know Lindsay is at work, so she's unfortunately not able to tune in. We've also got Sing Splint as well, so we've got essentially a full house of moderators on what is promised to be a very, very busy stream this evening. Just bear with me a second while I have a sip of my coffee. I'm going to need it. I'm sure you are as well. But yes, it's going to be a very interesting look through the winter forecast. We're going to kind of comb through what has been released on the website. It is now freely available for you to check out. So if you click on, simply Google marfoganweather.com, and you can find the winter forecast on there. I have to say that there will be one or two fine tweaks just in the next week or so with regards to this forecast overall, but generally the verdict will be discussed this evening. It is now available freely online, and you can check that out at your leisure. It has to be said that where I've got this idea and this forecast from is based on various teleconnections that are present within the global system. We've got obviously a certain type of sea surface temperature profile. We've got the ENSO, which is essentially at neutral at the moment. We don't really have neither an El Nino or a La Nina. We're borderline weak La Nina, but due to fairly strong westerly winds blowing across the west and central Pacific in recent weeks, I'll explain a little bit about why that has been the case. But that has essentially shut down this developing La Nina, and therefore that may change the dynamics and the ingredients. So a lot of complicated factors to go into, and I appreciate that not everybody is going to understand the finer details of what I'm saying, but kind of just bear with me anyway. And I hope you can stick with me because this will be a relatively lengthy discussion. But the verdict will be released at the end of the stream, and you will know fully what my ideas are with regards to this upcoming winter season. You have to go with your gut. Last winter, for example, there was that little inkling in the bottom of my stomach suggesting that mild was going to overdo the overall pattern, and that essentially is what took place. We've seen a very warm east and central Pacific last year. The El Nino wasn't really connecting up with the atmosphere. That, in combination of a couple of other things, allowed swings between mild and cold through the first half of the winter season last year. But then I believe anyway the El Nino effect started to really grow as the winter season went on. And really from about mid-January last year, after spells of warm and cold, the mild overdid everything from a northern hemispheric perspective. And I think the La Nina, or El Nino should I say, it really took over the pattern. Remember, we had such a warm spell during the second half of January and through the February period. But we've got over 100 concurrent viewers at the moment here. Let's go through the live chat initially, and then we'll go into the finer details. So who was the first one on tonight's chat? Just bear with me a little second here. And it looks as if Paul James was actually the first person on. Then we had Gav's Weather Vids. A massive thank you to Gav. I know he's been promoting this forecast as well, so a massive thank you to you. We'll have Inverness, Scotland on. We've got Lisa. We've got Elof, or Elof. I do apologise if I'm pronouncing that wrong. We've got the Best of Sweden. We've got Sink Splint. We've got Richard Trott tuning in. Chris A. We've got Steve. We've got Frog's Legs Matthew. We've got Paul Farwell. We've got Hazel Kitching. We've got Siv H. We've got Ian Burks. We've got Stephen Lee. Jace72. Shy Society. Chris A. We've got, who else have we got here? Outcast Lion 35. Who else have we got? Mr. Aston. We've got anybody else? We've got Lee Stevens. Thanks very much, Lee, for tuning in. Who else? We've got Rachel Bloxton as well tuning in. We've got Isabel Grog also tuning in. I hope you're well, Isabel. Thanks for tuning in. This evening we've got Katrine. We've got Nature's Rhythms. We've got, who else have we got this evening here? And then we will get into the nuts and bolts real quick. So I do apologise for the slight late start to tonight's stream. We've also got Fed Up Brit also tune in as well. We've got 104 concurrent viewers at the moment. Spread the love with everybody. I would greatly appreciate that. And also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. It's going to be an interesting winter following from what we've seen so far. Coldest summer since 2015 for the UK. We've also got David and Joyce Fogan tuning in from Kirkintilloch as well. A massive thank you to yourselves for tuning in. I hope you are both keeping well and you've had a good Sunday also. So let me see here. Are we going to go into tonight's stream? Yes, we will, because the time is now going on for 7:45 in the evening. So I hope everybody has enjoyed their weekend. We've obviously had flooding across parts of the UK, especially South Wales. Were in excess of 150 millimetres of rainfall. We had 80 mile per hour winds. We had major snowfall. We had and also a rapid rise in temperature as well. So certainly Storm Brett has left its mark. It is now going to be swinging bodily across the northern UK, bringing more wet and windy conditions over the next wee while or so, and then that will kick out. We'll have a kind of changeable, unsettled week coming up, a little bit cooler compared to what we've seen over the last 24 hours, but looks as if the mild is going to really start to kick in as we progress through the final days of November and beginning of December. So there we go. We will start off winter 2024-25 on what I think will be a reasonably mild note. Nothing particularly warm, nothing particularly cold. I think it'll be a little bit of in between. But yeah, let's go into the winter 2024 forecast here. So, like I say, just bear with me here. Let's blow this up a little bit more and hopefully you can see it. If you're watching on TV, probably the best way to be able to see what I'm showing properly. And we will see if this is going to look best. So just bear with a second. Sorry about this. And we'll see if this is going to come up okay. So I'm not cutting anything off. So let's crack on then. Can I go one more? Just let me quick double check. Is this going to be too much? So I don't want to cut anything off. I want you to be able to see what I am seeing here. And where we go. Come on, Mark. Right. Anyway, So a very warm welcome to everybody. The European winter forecast 2024-25. Let's get right into it here. So you can see what we've had over the last wee while or so, but a very warm welcome to my 15th consecutive winter forecast. In this forecast, the conclusions drawn for the upcoming 90-day meteorological winter period will be based on current climate and climate drivers at play, including current global sea surface temperature profile, the ENSO or El Nino Southern Oscillation, solar maximum, and much, much more. An important factor to consider, however, is the level of warmth in our oceans, atmosphere, and on land. Record warmth continues to increase, and this will be most certainly shift the parameters, possibly altering the influences of the climate drivers we often look at. So in essence, what I mean by that is the general climate drivers or teleconnections that we've looked at and forecasters have looked at for many, many years. You usually get a certain type of regime based on certain things. But when you've got a very, very warm overall ocean surface globally, that tends to kind of then change the equation somewhat, and it will have influence on, or it may dampen down some of the influences that these teleconnections have done in the past. I hope that kind of makes sense. So generally speaking, we know that we're in a period of global warmth. We do have a very warm global temperature, net temperature, sea surface temperature profile. We've got warm land, and obviously the atmosphere above is warmer compared to what it was 20, 30 years ago. So these are the current global sea surface temperature anomalies here. So we've got a very, very warm versus cold North Pacific. So if we look specifically up in the North Pacific, which is right here in the center of the chart, I do appreciate that it's maybe a little bit difficult to see this, but this is indicative of quite a negative Pacific decadal oscillation at the moment, when you've got a cold pool south of Alaska here within the North Pacific, the Gulf of Alaska, and you've got very warm waters here extending from Japan out into the Central Pacific. The greater the contrast here between central and northeastern North Pacific, the more negative or positive the Pacific decadal oscillation will be. But you can see here that we've got what is a La Nina that's trying to develop, and it's having a hard time doing so. In fact, we've warmed the waters in close to South America. We've also seen a warming taking place over the Central Pacific. And what's going to be important about this is exactly where that warm and cold water lies. Now, you notice that we've got a very warm, uniform, warm Indian Ocean. So we've got a neutral Indian Ocean dipole here. So it's neither warm or cold. It's neither positive or negative. It's generally warm throughout the basin, which then suggests that we've got a generally neutral Indian Ocean dipole. The North Atlantic, we're still in that warm AMO phase, or Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation. So again, that has influence on the atmosphere above. We've got a little bit of cooling taking place to the east of North America. We've got a warm Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico. Obviously, we're coming close to an end to the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season. Do check out the video yesterday if you haven't already done so and you're interested. So let's get into it. What do we know? What is it generally quite certain? We've got warm oceans overall. We've got a neutral to borderline weak La Nina. So that is a cold phase of the El Nino Southern Oscillation. We've got a cold PDO, Pacific Decadal Oscillation. We've got a warm Atlantic, which is a warm multi-decadal oscillation. The Indian Ocean, like I've already said, is neutral. The QBO, it's going to be westerly this year. We'll look at the details in just a second. We're also in the midst of a solar maximum at the moment here as well. How many concurrent viewers have we got? We've got 139 at the moment here. Let's try and see if the audience will build further. It would be great to see everybody tune in. So anyway, let's have a quick look first and foremost at the Arctic Oscillation and the North Atlantic Oscillation. These are probably our most important and most focused on of the several teleconnections we look at from a European winter pattern point of view. So there's a lot of talk every winter about the Arctic Oscillation and the North Atlantic Oscillation. This essentially dictates whether we've got a mild regime or a warm regime over Europe, and that also correlates to Eastern North America as well. In short and simple, these indices are a measure of air pressure, and the below graphics show what is a positive of both oscillations, which tend to promote milder weather for Europe, while a negative AO-NAO promotes colder. So the positive Arctic Oscillation looks like this here. It means that we've got quite a bottled up cold pool within the Arctic region. We've got the low atmospheric pressure. That tends to lead to stronger jet stream winds, a more zonal flat jet, which means that we flood the continents, the mid latitudes, with milder conditions off both the Pacific and the Atlantic. When you've got a negative Arctic Oscillation, pressure tends to be higher compared to average up within the Arctic region. You also tend to find that the jet stream within the mid-latitude belt tends to be weaker. It allows warmer air to move towards the pole. It allows colder air to move south towards the equator. We've got this undulating of the jet stream. So we've got warm lifting north. We've got cold dropping south. We've got generally a weak polar vortex in result of that. So that's the Arctic Oscillation. The North Atlantic Oscillation looks like this. When positive, you tend to have a stronger Icelandic low. We've got a stronger Azores high. We've got a strong jet in between the conflicting air masses of warm and cold. You tend to find that it's generally milder across northwestern areas of Europe. When you've got a negative North Atlantic Oscillation, which we've just seen, we're just coming off the back of a pretty strong Greenland block, so high pressure up towards Greenland. We've got the jet moving northwards, North Atlantic up into Greenland, up towards the Arctic region. That allows cold to come south, both over Eastern North America and over western areas of Europe here. Got a very wavy or amplified jet stream as a result of a negative North Atlantic Oscillation. So I've explained briefly, hopefully it's easy to understand. I've explained briefly the positive versus the negative in both the Arctic Oscillation and the North Atlantic Oscillation. So sometimes the above oscillations reflect one another. They often do. So basically, when you've got a negative Arctic Oscillation, you tend to have a negative North Atlantic Oscillation. But sometimes they don't coincide with one another. While the AO and the NAO is important in determining a potentially colder or milder pattern, what drives these oscillations is even more important. Let's take a tour of the bigger picture. So basically the AO and the NAO is one thing, but what essentially dictates the positive or the negative? So the El Nino Southern Oscillation is generally around neutral at the moment. We have neither a prominent El Nino or a prominent La Nina at the moment. So the quick AI overview is that La Nina is a natural climate phenomenon that occurs when the sea surface temperatures in the central and east equatorial Pacific drop below average. Definition is that La Nina is a cold phase of the El Nino Southern Oscillation cycle, which is a series of year-to-year variations in the tropical Pacific. So back in the spring, the models were suggesting a strong cold phase of the ENSO, but due to other factors which shall be discussed below, in truth, and as of late November, we remain largely neutral, so neither an El or La is present at the moment here. Both the El Nino and La Nina have significance on the global atmosphere, so this is the reasons why it's very important to look at all these big drivers, these big climate drivers. This is what's determining the ideas that I have for this upcoming winter. So the stronger these warm and cold phases, so either a strong to super, either El Nino or La Nina, tends to have a greater and more overwhelming influence on the pattern. And that means that other teleconnections such as the MJO and other factors tends to be kind of overridden by this strong warm or cold phase of the Pacific and the tropical Pacific. More often than not, a strong to super El Nino or La Nina tends to favour milder conditions for Western Europe. We obviously don't have that this year. The neutral to possibly borderline weak La Nina or the colder than normal SSTs in the equatorial Pacific is one thing, but this is important, but where those coldest waters are positioned within the Pacific along the equator is vital to other aspects coming into play, and we'll explain the MJO in a little bit of a time. So, and the cold waters affecting the atmosphere above, so we also have to see the coupling between the ocean and the atmosphere. This is measured by two key indices, the Southern Oscillation Index value and the MEI, or the Multivariate ENSO Index. So these are two indices that we look at that determines whether the atmosphere is coupled with the anomalous warm or cold waters underneath. So this is quite important. So in short, these values as of late November do not reflect a La Nina base state. We've actually got positive values in the SOI, which means that the atmosphere is actually kind of more looking like El Nino as opposed to La Nina, which is quite interesting. So this is kind of almost reinforcing the fact that we're not really in a La Nina. And the question mark is, are we even going to see La Nina conditions this upcoming winter, or are they going to generally stay neutral? So this is the latest Southern Oscillation Index values as of today. So the 30-day average is 4.33. So that's positive values. That tends to mean that the El Nino is actually more telling within the atmosphere as opposed to a La Nina. The average SOI for the 90-day period is 3.70. Daily contribution SOI calculation is 21.82, which is very strong in the positive territory as opposed to the negative. You would expect to see these values the other way about. So anyway, I think I'm talking sense with that one. I hope I am. So even if the La Nina does develop and would be weak at that, it may well be too little too late to have any real influence on the winter coming up. That being said, however, if waters happen to cool west of 80 degrees west longitude, which is the international dateline, this may have influence, and I shall explain that further down the road. So the cooling within the central portion of the Pacific would have possibly a negative influence on the winter. I actually think I've actually got that wrong. I think the positive values are more reflective of La Nina. Let me know in the comment section below. I'm getting myself a little bit confused here, and I do apologise for that. So yeah, we've got currently 168 viewers at the moment here. So please hit that like button. It lets YouTube know that you're enjoying the content here. It spreads the channel throughout the platform of YouTube as well, obviously. So it would be greatly appreciated. I'm trying to build the subscribers. I'm trying to build the views. There's a lot of hard work going on here in the background. And let's continue with it. The QBO, or the quasi-biennial oscillation. In turn, what this means, I'm going to very quickly go over this, but this is another important aspect to consider. So NASA's description of the QBO is that the quasi-biennial oscillation is a tropical lower stratospheric downward propagating zonal wind variation with an average period of around 28 months. So it goes between westerly winds and easterly winds. The importance of the QBO is that it dominates the variability of the tropical lower stratospheric meteorology. I know it's very technical, this, but we're not going to go into too much detail. The QBO is important for seasonal forecasting, and the QBO controls stratospheric ozone and water variability that can modulate surface ultraviolet, UV essentially, and IR radiation. So quite a technical, quite a complex teleconnection this, but this winter coming up is going to be a westerly wind within the stratosphere over the equator. Put simply, westerly winds within the stratosphere over the equator tend to favour both a stronger polar vortex and westerly flow. In other words, the jet stream winds. Stronger the PV, the polar vortex, and the jet stream, the more likely we have a positive of the Arctic Oscillation and the North Atlantic Oscillation, leading to a milder and more Atlantic-dominated outcome for northwestern Europe. So strong Icelandic low, strong Azores high. Easterly winds within the stratosphere over the equator tend to have frictional effects on the westerlies and the jet stream, and this can result in a weaker polar vortex, resulting in a more wavy or amplified jet, allowing warmth northwards towards the pole and cold southwards towards the lower latitudes. However, that being said, it has to be said that this is not that simple, and the above isn't always the case. Other outside factors have been known to flip the above rule the opposite way. So in essence, to summarise the QBO, westerly winds within the stratosphere tend to lead to a stronger polar vortex, stronger jet stream, milder conditions overall with a positive Arctic oscillation, North Atlantic oscillation. But that isn't always the case when you have other factors to consider. We have to then go out with the global atmosphere and to the sun. We have a solar maximum of cycle 25 at this very moment in time. What is a solar maximum? According to the AI overview, solar maximum is the peak of the sun's 11-year activity cycle. When the sun's magnetic field flips and there's a spike in solar activity, sunspots, the number of sunspots on the sun's surface is at its highest levels of the cycle, which we've got now, solar flares. The number of solar flares is at its highest, and the coronal mass ejections, or CMEs, they are also at a maximum at this moment in time. One factor that has to be known to flip the QBO rule the other way is solar activity, and a maximum to be exact. So when you've got there's some research that suggests that when you've got solar maximum in combination with a west QBO, we're currently at solar maximum cycle 25. It's stronger than 24, but it's weaker than 23, as seen in the sunspot numbers below. So when you've got this solar maximum in combination with a west QBO, you can sometimes have the opposite effect, and actually you can favour more of a negative AO, NAO. We've got a greater chance of potentially seeing sun stratospheric warmings, for example. We're also going to very briefly touch on some words from Dr. Joe DeLeo. When the sun is active, there are more geomagnetic storms, aurora events. There is less clouds due to diffused cosmic rays, and more UV, increased by 6 to 8%, which warms through ozone chemistry, and a measurable increase in brightness. There is enhanced global warming as a result of a solar maximum. Total solar effect can be seen in this graphic here. The opposite is true with solar minimum. And again, not necessarily going to go into everything here. You can see this at your leisure if you click onto the website. But high solar can mean less blocking, except when the QBO is westerly, as it is now. The west QBO can mean episodes of strat warming in the polar regions, which allows polar air, often trapped at higher latitudes, to expand south. Snow is often less in most high flux years. So in essence, solar maximum tends to favour milder and warmer. Solar minimum tends to favour the opposite. So, but in short, solar maximum suggests stronger polar vortex and westerlies bottled within the Arctic over the pole. This floods the middle latitudes with Atlantic air. And I've already explained the fact that we've got potentially the opposite taking place, but we'll wait and see what happens. There is higher than usual levels of stratospheric ozone over the pole as well. This can be attributed to stronger incoming solar radiation. Neutral Indian Ocean dipole I've already touched on. We're in neutral, warm, uniform basin at that. So this is where things get a little bit more interesting here, and this is where I've been studying the tropical atmosphere and the relationship between the tropical atmosphere and the high latitudes and the type of weather we see here in Western Europe. So what's been happening from tropics to pole, even up into the stratosphere? There is a connection between the tropics, the pole, and the stratosphere. Let's discuss what is probably an aspect or element of forecasting I'm most passionate and excited about, and has proved me correct even ahead of the models in recent months. So we're going to talk about the Mann-Julian oscillation in a little bit more detail here, because I've been using this teleconnection for some time, becoming more interested in how it interacts. It's quite a complex relationship. The general rule is that we've got enhanced convection over a certain region within the tropics. Where you've got that rising, you've also got sinking. So you've got an active phase in the MJO and you've got an inactive phase. But we cannot underestimate the power of the MJO. This has undoubtedly become an integral tool in my mid to long range forecast, and it works pretty well for the most part. And actually, the past few months has evidence of that being the case. A seemingly simple. So, what is the MJO? A seemingly simple rainfall or thunderstorm enhanced atmospheric wave which propagates eastwards through the equatorial Indian and Pacific Oceans. It releases heat energy, which then can dictate the jet stream position, strength, and amplitude. Therefore, it dictates the upstream and downstream wavelengths. So, in other words, the ridges and the troughs, how strong they are, how deep they are, and also how shallow they are as well, because you can get a flattened out jet. You tend to have a lot of troughiness and cold bottled up within the Arctic. Ridges tend to build northwards when you've got certain phases of the MJO. It even dictates tropical cyclone activity across the planet, as well as the El Nino and the La Nina development. And we've seen the MJO actually having a detrimental effect on the La Nina in recent times, because the MJO has been positioned over the Pacific, which means we've actually had winds blowing more westerly as opposed to easterly. For a La Nina to develop, you need to have stronger easterly winds blowing. That then forces the water from deep below the surface up to the surface. Then that strengthens the La Nina signal. That being said, the MJO has distorted the wind flow over the Pacific and the Indian Ocean, creating the opposite effect. We've actually seen water temperatures within the Central and East Pacific warming up. Therefore, the La Nina is struggling to develop due to that MJO. But that MJO position where it has been has allowed us to see colder conditions. So it's all interconnected. The relationship between the tropics and the pole and the effects of the polar vortex. Stronger polar vortex, this is the area of essentially low pressure, but a cold pool spinning over the top of the pole at the moment. When it is strong, you tend to have stronger westerly winds, milder conditions within the middle latitude pattern, tend to have milder North America and Europe, because we've got Pacific air and Atlantic air flooding the continents. When you've got a disrupted or weakened polar vortex, you tend to have that cold getting drained southwards into the middle latitude pattern. And it's the MJO and where it is positioned that can have influence on what's going on within the mid to upper levels of the stratosphere. So it's all interesting stuff. I hope you're following along up until now. I know it's very in-depth. I know my parents, mum and dad, watching this is probably lost, and I do apologise for that. But all the while, this is, again, the evidence to back up these ideas. There is 8 phases of the MJO, or enhanced convection and thunderstorm activity, starting off in the West Indian Ocean in phase 1, then phases 2 and 3, and then once it goes into the enhanced thunderstorm activity, goes into the maritime continent, that's phases 4 and 5. That tends to promote a positive Arctic oscillation, North Atlantic oscillation, very, very driven by mild Atlantic air when you've got phases 2, 3, and 4 and 5. Once you start to enter phases 6, you tend to promote a lot of blocky high pressure over the UK and Western Europe. That's what we've seen at least 2 occasions during the course of the autumn where we've been stuck in a phase 6. That's been supporting that blocky high pressure over the UK, Ireland, Western, Central Europe. Remember, we've had these big flooding events across parts of Southern Europe. That's been indicative of that blocking high pressure over Central and Northern Europe. Low pressure stuck underneath, creating these extreme rainfall events in combination with a record warm Mediterranean. All the ingredients have came together. That's been when the MJO has been in phases 6. Also seen during phases 3, the MJO being in that eastern Indian Ocean, we've seen the development of 3 storms now, in fact. Late October, we've seen a storm Lillian develop. Then we've seen late October, storm Ashley develop. And I know we've had a named storm in the last, obviously, 24, 36 hours. But we've essentially not been so much in phase 3. But nonetheless, I would expect to see the potential of something a little bit more unsettled coming up. So this graphic here essentially shows you the MJO and where it's positioned on the phase diagram. But we'll kind of skip through that. Warm and cold sea surface temperature anomalies can dictate where the MJO or the enhanced convection positions itself. So the connection between sea surface temperatures and the atmosphere is very, very important indeed in itself, which therefore dictates the flat or zonal strong jet or weak and amplified middle latitude pattern, ultimately dictating the positive or the negative of the Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation. What do these various phases correlate to? So if you look at this diagram here, when it's in the West Pacific, so the enhancement is over the western portion of the Pacific, you tend to lead to blocking high pressure over the UK and Europe. That's what we've seen. Then we rotate into phases 7. That means northerly blocking, high pressure over Greenland, a negative NAO, and cold weather for the UK and Ireland. And lo and behold, where were we back 10 to 14 days ago? We were in phases 7 and 8 of the MJO. And as I've seen the model suggesting phases 7 and 8 of the MJO, I predicted cold from mid to late November. The modelling, even back at the end of October, was not seeing cold or blocky high pressure over Greenland. That did eventually happen. I stood by my faith in the MJO and what that can correlate to. When you've got a phase 1 and 2 of the MJO, it tends to lead to high pressure over Iceland, low pressure over Europe, less settled across the UK, especially the south. Once you enter phases 3 and 4, it tends to lead to a positive NAO, mild, unsettled UK westerly winds as a result of phase 3. And that is quite often when you see MJO moving in through the Indian Ocean towards the maritime continent, you tend to feel more unsettled, possibly stormy, but also milder conditions as a result of that. So this is where we've been over the last 90 days. Again, I'll quickly skip over this. Generally, the correlation between the MJO and the phase versus where we are with the Arctic Oscillation has been pretty remarkable actually in recent months. So the correlation between unsettled and stormy and warm phases, so that's phases 2, 3 and 4 and 5 versus the blocky high pressure into the colder phases with the positive AO-NAO correlation. So a very nice correlation showing up between the warm phases and a positive Arctic Oscillation and the cold phases, negative Arctic Oscillation as a result. Back into the warm phases, we've seen that during the back half of October through the first half of November. Then as the MJO moved into phases 7, 8 and 1, I expected to see cold with a negative Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation, and that has developed. There's a lot of text here at this point. I'm not going to look through that in detail because it's just too long-winded, I'm afraid. So we reached the all-important, interesting verdict with regards to the 2024-25 winter season. Is it going to be warm or is it going to be cold? That is the question. So let's get to it. I believe I must go with my gut. I went with my gut last year to an extent, but I didn't go enough with the gut, and therefore I slightly got stung during the back half of last winter. I predicted ups and downs in terms of warm and cold during the first half of the winter. I predicted a colder second half of the winter last year, and it was quite the opposite. But there was a small part of me in my gut that was suggesting that El Nino was going to take over the pattern and provide a very mild second half to winter last year. That actually took place. What is my gut telling me this year? Mild outdoes the cold overall. Doesn't mean that we're not going to get cold weather this year, but I think that the mild is going to be more dominant than cold in the winter of 2024-25. The SST anomalies are one thing, but the stratosphere is another thing. The uniform warm Indian Ocean that we have this year to the Indonesia region suggests to me that an active MJO pulse stuck more often than not over stormy phases of 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 would result in a predominantly positive Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation. So a mild period more often than not for northwestern Europe. However, this is important to remember. So I'm not necessarily suggesting here that we've got an overall mild dominated winter. But in recent weeks, the westerly winds blowing over the West Tropical Pacific could help move the MJO from Indian to Pacific, especially the Central Pacific, and therefore shifting the AO-NAO towards the negative. I believe we have some decent periods of cold as MJO should swing into the colder phases of 7, 8 and 1. But I think the winter default position will be phases 2 and 3 into 4 and 5, resulting in a lot of Atlantic dominance for northwestern Europe. So I think the first half of December, we're entering the warmer phases. We've also got a strengthening of the stratospheric polar vortex. That to me essentially means that we've got a very high probability of at least the first half of December being warmer than average. The polar vortex behaviour is the elephant in the room for me. It's expected strengthening into December, aided by the positive AO. MJO phases 2 and 3 into 4 and 5 isn't a good indicator for anything other than mild through December. So if we look at this off the ECMWF model, the suggestion is that we are in phases 2 at the moment. We're expected over the next 5 days to go into phases 3. So that would suggest to me we had phases 3, and the last 2 MJO phases 3 produced a storm for the UK. It would not surprise me over the next couple of weeks if we get stormy weather here in Western Europe. It then is expected, if you look at the day 15 to 20, it's expected to go from phases 3 into 4 into 5. That has mild written all over it. And what re-emphasises the mild theme is when you look at the stratospheric polar vortex strength. That is measured, by the way, in 2 different ways. The temperature is one thing. The colder the temperature, the stronger the polar vortex overall. But generally, another factor to consider is the zonal mean wind. And the stronger those winds circling the polar vortex, the stronger the polar vortex itself will be. And therefore, you would expect to see more of a positive AO, NAO, and mild, generally speaking. Now, it's expected, according to the ECMWF, to go from slightly weaker than average to actually record strong as we move out of November and through the first half of December. So the dates are along the bottom, the strength in the zonal winds along the side column, and the thick red line indicates the climatological average. The thin red line at the top is the record strong, and the bottom red line is record weak. And you can see here that the ensemble mean is represented in the thick blue line. It is actually above record strong territory. So the combination of the MJO entering phases 2, 3, 4 and 5 and a record strong stratospheric polar wind, it would suggest mild conditions overall. The MJO, I think, will head back into 7 and 8 mid-December, which may support a mild to warm, potentially stormy first 10 to 20 days, followed by colder final 15 to 20 days. One cannot rule out an SSW or sudden stratospheric warming, which would support a more prolonged and stronger period of cold weather. There's little evidence of anything before Christmas. The neutral ENSO, the solar maximum, combined with the West QBO suggest a 50-50 chance for an SSW, and without one, I believe mild will be stronger and longer than any cold spells. But the cold spells we do see could be substantial. In my opinion, the evidence for that is in what we have observed so far based on the MJO. So I think we could see some of these big swings from very mild to pretty cold. So we've seen that during the month of November. Abnormally mild conditions are now back in play once again. They'll ease off, obviously, in the next little while or so. But generally speaking, we're seeing these big fluctuations between very strong AO to very weak negative AO. We've also seen these big swings between midwinter cold conditions. This has been a pretty notable November cold spell, by the way. Probably the strongest, I would say, at least since 2016, but possibly 2010. But we've also seen very mild conditions as well. So we're seeing these big fluctuations and extremes. And I think that is possible this upcoming winter season. So let's do a monthly breakdown. I've overall said that the winter is likely to be warmer compared to colder. December, mild with an opportunity for a few named storms in the west and northwest Europe. Colder with heavy snowfall into the Balkan and Eastern Europe. The MJO is expected to return towards phases 6. And if it does so, we could see another period of stagnant high pressure. Remember, I had that anticyclonic gloom for a good couple of weeks at least. That was when we were in strong phase 6, by the way, and we could see another episode of that, which may result in a dry but perhaps chilly spell with lingering fog during the mid portions of December. Late December offers an opportunity for something colder towards Christmas, New Year, and a slightly higher chance for snow during the holiday period. So there you go. I'm saying mild first half and slightly colder towards the second half, maybe leaning towards Christmas. Now, in terms of a prolonged spell of cold, I think the chances are quite low. But if we had have had a cold spell continue in the early December, for example, and the MJO correlating that, we would likely have seen a greater chance of seeing a milder Christmas New Year period. But in fact, we may see the opposite because of the timing and change in the MJO, the strengthening of the stratospheric polar vortex. We're seeing it late November into early December, which means that we've got a greater chance, I think, of seeing something colder towards the end of December. So that may be good news if you're hoping for a colder Christmas New Year period, possible frost and snow, etc. Slightly milder than average is what I expect for the month of December. Let's look at January. Depending on the behaviour of the polar vortex and likely MJO return towards the Indian Ocean, I would say mild Atlantic conditions remain through the first 10 to 15 days of January, with another opportunity of something colder through the final 10 days or so of the month. So again, similar to this December, I think we're going to have a mild first half, colder second half to January, near average overall. But again, do we have an opportunity for some sort of sudden stratospheric warming developing? The mean zonal winds, according to the ECMWF, are expected to weaken slightly towards the back half of December. So is the model seeing something taking place? Who knows? But February, again, a lot depends on the PV, but I think yet another month sees spells of both mild and cold, perhaps stormy also. Possibly a greater chance of seeing colder than average during the month of February. So overall, a somewhat milder winter is expected, with spells of cold and coupled with snow as well. That is the thinking that I have. I hope you've enjoyed that probably long-winded, in-depth look at the winter forecast. I know there is a lot in there, but generally speaking, that is my thinking anyway with regards to the upcoming cold season. We'll wait and see exactly what takes place. What do you think winter is going to do? Let me know in the live chat and also the comment section as well below, because obviously the live chat eventually does shut down. But we've currently still got 170 viewers at the moment. Let me know what you think of this analysis, this overview of my winter forecast prediction. We'll see what happens. Like I say, I'm going to do a bit of I'm going to do a little bit of fine tuning of this article over the next week or so here. Probably provide a little bit more detail, even possibly lowest and warmest temperatures expected for the UK month by month, so the December through January period. So I hope everybody has enjoyed that. Obviously, a major sudden stratospheric warming, if one did occur, has a greater chance of seeing something more of a beast from the east kind of scenario. That is another thing that cannot be ruled out, by the way, in terms of a sudden stratospheric warming may trigger easterly winds, cold coming in off Siberia, etc., etc. But there is a there's many things to consider. There's also the Eurasian snow cover idea. It's not in the article. I sometimes struggle with that one because sometimes we do get significant snow cover over Siberia. The general thinking is that the greater the snow cover over Siberia during the month of October leads to a stronger Siberian high. That then can have a frictional effect in the stratospheric circulation, can lead to sudden stratospheric warmings, and as a consequence, the release of Arctic air into the middle latitudes. That is something that I'm not 100% sure about. We've also got low Arctic sea ice. That also, with more water within the Arctic Ocean, can lead to more warmth within from the ocean up into the atmosphere and lead to more enhanced blocking over the Arctic, and that again can result in cold getting pushed to the south. So, like I said, I hope you have enjoyed tonight's live stream. The winter forecast for 2024-25 has been released. I'm pretty much pushing 55 or so minutes, so I'm going to call it a day at that. We've got the JL, we've got Jack Lowe. Jack Lowe says, thanks, Mark. Yes, a mild December, mild January with cold end, but a beast in February, going into March, then an early spring. That is a very, very interesting call, my friend, and I think that is very, very possible indeed. Joyce Fogan says, well done, Mark. Thank you. Rich is on. I know there's a bit of chat amongst each other, which I love to see. We've got Carol, we've got Elof, we've got obviously Lisa still on, J72, JL, Jack Lowe, City Andy, we've got Chris Clifford, we've got Hazel Kitching, we've got Adam Blunston, Frog's Legs Matthew, we've got Chris A, we've got James 098 also tuning in. Thank you to you, James. Good to see you. Lee Stevens, we've got anybody else? Steve, we've got Frog's Legs Matthew. Big audience tonight. A massive thank you to everybody for tuning in to this evening's live stream. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, what's left of it, and obviously stay up to date over the next several days and weeks to come. It's going to be a lot more winter chat now from now on, and let's see what the next few weeks has on offer. Obviously, European Outlook Monday to Friday. Then I've got a couple of thoughts with regards to the Saturday, due to the fact that the tropics are now shutting down. Might try and start up the weather talk series once again. I've got a couple of ideas up my sleeve for that one, so that may be a Saturday feature coming up in a couple of weeks' time, hopefully. And obviously, every Sunday we'll have the Global Weather Report live each Sunday coming up also. So plenty of reason to stick around here, like and subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow evening with the European Outlook. Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.